Her world was a canvas painted in muted grays, storm drains, alleyways, and the soft glow of distant city lights. To the passers-by rushing through their lives, she didn't exist. A whisper of fur, a flicker of movement in the corner of their vision, then nothing. But she was there, living a life stitched together by moments of survival and silence. She was small, lean, and covered in matted fur, a testament to the battles she fought every single day. Her golden eyes pierced the darkness, both sharp and hauntingly beautiful, yet burdened with stories no one had asked to hear. If eyes are the windows to the soul, hers were fortified with iron bars. She had to protect herself after all. In her world, trust was a weakness, and survival was the only goal. What was her name? Did she even have one? It was hard to tell how long she had lived this way. Days blurred into months, seasons passed unnoticed except for the sharp bite of winter or the relentless heat of summer. What we do know is this: she had no companions, no safe haven, and no memory of what it felt like to be loved. But that all changed one fateful night. It began like any other, cold, quiet, and lonely. She crouched beneath a dumpster, her body pressed against the cold concrete. Her ears twitched at every sound. The distant hum of cars, the occasional clatter of trash bins, the murmurs of humans far beyond her reach. Hunger gnawed at her insides. It had been days since her last meal, a discarded sandwich crust from the bakery's trash. Tonight, she would need to venture further into the city, closer to danger if she wanted to find food. But just as she prepared to move, her nose caught a scent, a tantalizing aroma that made her pause. Fresh chicken. Her instincts flared. This was unusual. Fresh food was rare and often came with a trap. Her heart quickened, a mixture of hope and fear flooding her tiny frame. She inched forward, her golden eyes scanning the dimly lit alley for any signs of danger. And that's when she saw it. A plate of food, placed carefully near the edge of the alley, as if it were waiting just for her. And there, a few steps behind the plate, was a human. Not moving, not speaking, just sitting on the cold pavement with their hand outstretched. The human held no leash, no net, no sign of ill intent. But still, she hesitated. Could she trust them? Her mind screamed to turn back, to retreat to the safety of the shadows, but her stomach growled louder. She took a step forward, then another. Her movements were slow, deliberate, each paw placed carefully as if the ground beneath her might give way. The human remained still, their soft eyes watching her with something she hadn't seen before. Patience. Finally, she reached the plate. The smell of the chicken was overwhelming, her hunger almost unbearable. She devoured it in seconds, glancing up at the human between bites. They made no move to capture her, no sound to scare her away. And as she licked the last crumbs from the plate, something inside her shifted. For the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't feel entirely alone. But what did this mean? Was this a fleeting moment of kindness, or the start of something she couldn't yet understand? Stay with me, because this is just the beginning of her journey. A journey that will challenge everything she thought she knew about the world, about trust, and about herself. The night was alive with whispers, trees rustling, the distant hum of a passing car, and the faint clink of glass from a nearby restaurant. It was a world she had navigated 1,000 times, a labyrinth of danger and opportunity. But tonight felt different. The scent of fresh chicken still lingered on her whiskers, and the memory of the human's soft gaze played like a melody she couldn't quite forget. She had returned to the alley, her steps cautious but purposeful. There was no plate this time, no offering waiting for her, but the human was there. Sitting in the same spot, their presence as steady as the moonlight casting faint shadows on the pavement. Why were they here? What did they want? Her instincts screamed at her to keep her distance. After all, humans had never been kind to her. They were loud, unpredictable, and often cruel. She remembered the sting of a thrown rock, the sharp crack of a stick meant to chase her away. But this one was different. They hadn't chased her, hadn't shouted or thrown anything. They had just sat there, waiting. The human's hand moved slightly, just enough to reveal a small piece of chicken resting in their palm. The scent reached her again, stronger this time, and her stomach clenched in response. She took a step forward, then stopped. Her heart raced, each beat pounding like a drum in her ears. What if it was a trick? What if this human, like so many before, only pretended to be kind until they got close enough to grab her. The fear was almost paralyzing, a chain that had bound her for years. But hunger is a powerful motivator, and tonight it overpowered her fear. She moved closer, her body low to the ground, ready to dart away at the slightest hint of danger. The human didn't move. Their eyes remained gentle, their posture unthreatening. She could feel her muscles trembling as she reached out with her paw, swiping the chicken from their hand in a single swift motion. And then she waited, her body frozen as she watched for a reaction. But none came. The human simply smiled, a small, soft curve of their lips that held no malice, no mockery, only warmth. She devoured the chicken, every bite sending a surge of relief through her body. It wasn't just the food, it was the safety, the absence of harm, the faint glimmer of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Hope. Over the next few nights, she found herself returning to the alley again and again. Each time, the human was there, always with food, always with that same quiet patience. She began to associate their presence with safety, their scent with comfort. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the fortress she had built around her heart began to crack. But trust is a fragile thing, isn't it? It doesn't come easily, especially when it's been broken time and time again. There were moments when her old fears resurfaced. Moments when she would run at the slightest sound or sudden movement. Yet something kept pulling her back, a thread of connection that grew stronger with each encounter. One night, as the human sat quietly with a plate of food beside them, she made a decision that surprised even herself. Instead of snatching the food and retreating to the shadows, she stayed. She sat a few feet away, her golden eyes locked onto the humans, as if trying to decode the mystery of their kindness. What was it about them that made her feel safe? Why did she keep coming back? And most importantly, what did this mean for her life? A life she had always believed was destined to be spent alone. As the human reached out slowly, their hand empty this time, she didn't flinch. Her heart raced, but she didn't run. Instead, she leaned in, just enough to brush her nose against their fingertips. It was a moment that lasted only seconds but felt like an eternity. And in that fleeting moment, something profound happened. She realized that maybe, just maybe, not all humans were the same. Maybe there was a place for her in this world, a place where she didn't have to be afraid. But this was only the beginning of her transformation. The road ahead would be filled with challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt. Would she find the strength to take the next step, to trust completely? Or would her fears pull her back into the darkness? Trust is a delicate thing, isn't it? It's like a cobweb, beautiful, intricate, and so easily torn apart. For her, trust was a luxury she'd never been able to afford. Every instinct told her to run, to stay in the shadows where she was safe. But something about this human, about the way they sat quietly, waiting without pressure, began to chip away at the walls she had built. The first time she allowed herself to sit near them, her body remained tense, her ears twitching at every sound. She didn't dare let her guard down. Yet there was a strange sense of calm in the human's presence, like a still pond reflecting the moon. They didn't try to touch her, didn't invade her space. They just existed alongside her. And for a creature who had spent her entire life feeling invisible, that meant everything. The days turned into weeks, and a fragile routine began to form. Each night, she would creep into the alley, and there they'd be, waiting with food and that same quiet patience. She started to let herself linger a little longer, her golden eyes studying them from a safe distance. And then, one night, something happened that changed everything. The human reached out, not with food this time, but with an open hand. It was an invitation, not a demand, and she froze. Her heart pounded like a drum, every fiber of her being screaming at her to run. But she didn't. Instead, she inched forward, her movements slow and deliberate. Her nose twitched as she sniffed their hand, searching for any hint of danger. And then, in a moment that felt like the world had stopped spinning, she did something she had never done before. She nuzzled their fingers. It was a small gesture, barely more than a brush of fur against skin, but it was monumental. For the human, it was a breakthrough, a sign that their patience was paying off. For her, it was a leap of faith, a step into the unknown. But trust isn't built in a day. The next time they reached out, she bolted, retreating to the shadows where she felt safe. It was as if the vulnerability of that one moment had frightened her more than anything else. Yet she came back. Again and again she returned, each time venturing a little closer, staying a little longer. The human understood her hesitance. They never pushed, never rushed her. They knew that trust, once broken, takes time to heal, and so they waited. On some nights she would sit beside them, her body tense but unmoving. On others she would disappear for hours, only to reappear when she was ready. And then came the first touch. It was accidental. A gentle brush of their hand against her fur as she reached for a piece of chicken. She froze, her golden eyes wide with fear, but the human didn't pull away. They stayed still, their hand resting lightly on her side. Slowly she relaxed, the warmth of their touch seeping through her fur. It was a turning point, a moment that marked the beginning of something new. She started to seek out their touch, first tentatively, then with growing confidence. Each time the connection between them deepened, like roots intertwining beneath the soil. But progress is rarely a straight line. There were setbacks, moments when a sudden noise or unexpected movement would send her scrambling back into the darkness. The human never showed frustration, never tried to force her back. They simply waited, knowing she would return when she was ready. And return she did, each time a little braver, a little more willing to let down her guard. She began to follow them, not just to the alley but beyond it, her curiosity leading her to explore parts of the world she had once feared. Her transformation wasn't just physical, it was emotional, even spiritual. She was learning to trust, to believe that not all humans were cruel, that some could be kind, patient, and even loving. But could this fragile trust withstand the challenges ahead? What would happen if something shattered the delicate bond they had built? There comes a moment in every story when the tide begins to turn, when the weight of the past no longer holds as much power, and the possibility of a brighter future starts to feel real. For her, that moment didn't arrive all at once. It crept in, as quietly as the dawn breaking over the city skyline, painting her world with hues she had never dared to imagine. The human, as steadfast as the rising sun, had become a constant in her life. They didn't just feed her body, they nourished her spirit, piece by piece. Each touch, each soft-spoken word, each moment of quiet companionship felt like a thread being woven into the tapestry of her existence. One night, under a sky scattered with stars, the human did something unexpected. They brought a small, woven basket lined with a soft blanket. It was nothing grand, just a simple gesture, but to her, it was profound. She sniffed at it cautiously, her golden eyes narrowing as she tried to make sense of this new addition to her world. The human didn't force her. They simply placed the basket down and stepped back, allowing her to explore it on her own terms. She circled it warily, her movements slow and deliberate. The blanket inside smelled faintly of the human, a scent she had come to associate with safety. Tentatively, she placed a paw inside, then another. The softness beneath her claws was unlike anything she had ever felt before. She curled up inside, her body fitting perfectly within the cozy confines. For the first time in her life, she felt what it was like to have a place to call her own, even if only for a moment. But the comfort of the basket was only the beginning. The human began to take small steps toward integrating her into their world. They brought her toys, simple things, like a ball of yarn or a feather on a string. At first, she ignored them, unsure of what to do. Play was a concept she had never known, a luxury reserved for those who didn't have to fight for survival. Yet as the days turned into weeks, she found herself batting at the feather, her movements hesitant but filled with a flicker of joy. The human's laughter, soft and melodic, filled the air, and for the first time she realized that joy could be shared. Her days grew brighter, her nights less lonely. She began to follow the human beyond the alley, her paws patting softly on the pavement as they led her to new places. A park where the grass was soft and the air was filled with the scent of flowers. A quiet street where the houses stood in neat rows, their windows glowing warmly in the evening light. But even as she embraced these new experiences, a part of her clung to the shadows. The fear of losing this newfound happiness, of being abandoned or betrayed, lingered like a ghost. Trust, she was learning, was not just about letting others in, it was about believing she was worthy of love in the first place. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the world was bathed in hues of orange and gold, the human extended an invitation that would change everything. They opened the door to their home and stepped aside, waiting to see if she would follow. She hesitated, her paws hovering at the threshold. The warmth from inside spilled out, wrapping around her like a gentle embrace. But the doorway felt like a line she wasn't sure she could cross. To step inside would mean leaving the life she had always known, with all its hardships and familiarity behind. The human knelt down, their hand outstretched, and spoke in a voice so soft it felt like a lullaby. "It's okay," they said. "You're safe here." Something in their voice broke through the walls she had so carefully built. It wasn't just the words, it was the way they said them, with a sincerity that made her want to believe. She took a tentative step forward, then another, until she was inside. The warmth of the home enveloped her, the scent of wood and fabric mingling with the faint aroma of food. It was a world entirely unlike the cold, harsh streets she had known. She curled up in a corner, her body tense, but her heart filled with a strange, unfamiliar feeling. Hope. The human didn't crowd her or try to touch her. They simply sat nearby, giving her space to adjust. And as the night wore on, she began to relax, her body sinking into the softness of the rug beneath her. Was this what it felt like to belong? To have a place where she didn't have to be on guard, where she could simply exist? The questions swirled in her mind, but for the first time they didn't feel so heavy. This was her turning point, the moment when the life she had always known began to fade into the background, replaced by the promise of something better. But the journey wasn't over yet. There were still challenges to face, fears to overcome, and lessons to learn. Would she fully embrace this new life, or would the ghosts of her past pull her back into the shadows? Stay with me, because the answer lies just ahead. Some moments in life are so profound, so transformative, that they linger in your heart forever. The kind of moments where you look back and realize you were never the same after. For her, crossing that threshold into the human's home wasn't just a physical act, it was a leap into the unknown. A step toward a future she never thought possible. But the true test of transformation doesn't come when you take the first step. It comes when you face the fears that once controlled you and decide to let them go. She had spent so long guarding herself, hiding in the shadows, that the light now felt blinding. Every creak of the floorboards, every unfamiliar sound from outside sent her nerves into overdrive. But the human was there, ever present, patient, and kind. Over time, the home became more than just a shelter. It became hers. The soft carpet beneath her paws, the warm sunlight filtering through the windows, the scent of food cooking in the kitchen. Each corner held a piece of peace that she had never known. There were no more dark alleyways, no more cold nights spent wondering if she would survive the next storm. Here in this home, she had found safety, love, and belonging. Yet there were moments when doubt still whispered in her mind, when the old fear crept back in. Was she truly safe? Was this just another fleeting kindness, destined to end like all the others? But each time those questions arose, the human was there to reassure her, not with words, but with their presence. They didn't force her to let go of her past. They didn't demand anything from her. They simply loved her for who she was, broken, cautious, and all. Her days began to fill with little joys. The sound of birds outside the window became her morning soundtrack. The quiet rustling of the leaves in the trees was her lullaby at night. She began to trust the rhythm of life, the gentle promise that each day would bring something new, a kind touch, a quiet moment, a small piece of chicken shared. But the greatest transformation wasn't just the peace she found in the home, it was the way she learned to trust herself again. In the beginning, she had been so afraid of the world, so certain that it was a place of pain and betrayal. But now, she could see the beauty in the smallest things. She could play with a toy, chase a sunbeam, and curl up next to the human without fear. For the first time in her life, she understood that love was not a luxury. It was a necessity, a lifeline that kept her from drowning in the darkness. One morning, as she sat on the windowsill, her gaze fixed on the world outside, the human came to her side, their hand brushing through her fur. It was a touch that carried a lifetime of meaning, a touch that said, "You're not alone anymore." And for her, that touch was everything. It was the moment she truly understood that she had found her forever family. Her story wasn't a fairy tale. There were no magic wands, no grand gestures. There were only small, quiet moments of connection, of trust, and of love. And through these moments she found something she never thought possible. A family. And perhaps that's the most beautiful thing of all. The love we seek isn't always the loudest, the flashiest, or the most dramatic. Sometimes it's the quietest, the gentlest, and the most patient. It's the kind of love that waits for you, no matter how long it takes. As she lay there in her basket, safe and content, she knew this was just the beginning. The past would always be part of her story, but it no longer controlled her. Her future was unwritten, full of possibility, full of hope. So what about you? What kind of love are you waiting for? Is there something in your life that's waiting for you to take that first step? To trust again, even when it feels impossible. The world is full of unexpected gifts, and sometimes all we need is the courage to embrace them. Take a moment to reflect on your own journey. Where do you see yourself in the story? And how will you open your heart to the love and peace that's waiting for you? Stay with us, because every story is just the beginning of something new.